Gosh, there's so many things in this wall, you could look at it forever. Giving them structure. That's a cool quote. I like that. I mean, where's the Seder plate? There's a Seder plate somewhere in this wall that I love. There's a lot of stuff from like South America too. Seder plate. Oh, there's the Seder plate. Yeah, look at this. I'm pretty sure that's what that is, right? I'm not Jewish, but that's a Seder plate, right? He kind of broke it up. Like there's the shank bone and then the, the bitter herbs, right? And then he put a sculpture of himself in the middle, as he does. So, yeah. Magic Gardens. And he goes all the way up. It's pretty fun. Oh, good morning, YouTube. We're here at a special place in Philly, and I got here early because I wanted to beat all the tourists. You know, I'm a local. I don't want to deal with all the crowds that show up here all the time. It's also, you know, I don't know. We're not gonna go inside, so. But I wanted to show you the outside of it. It's a pretty unique place, and the reason we're here is basically in my last video. So we're gonna start walking. We're gonna do a little walking tour of these mosaics, and we're gonna talk about art in Philadelphia, and specifically street art, because in my previous video, one of my previous videos, I went to another secret garden. That's a magic garden. I went to a fairy tale garden lost in the woods. If you saw that previous video a couple days ago. There's more tile. Like, look at the, I'm gonna just show you. Try to back up and capture. It's very hard to capture because this artist was so prolific. Every surface of these buildings is just covered. Let's see. Look at that huge face. The whole building. This is an old firehouse. We'll talk about this firehouse in a different video. It's also an important place. But this is the first, just to give you a teaser, this is the first black firehouse, fire engine company in America, I believe. So, but we'll get into the details. But yeah, this guy's so prolific. When I was growing up, I actually, yeah, they must have gotten rid of it, but I think it was this doorway. There was a huge Batman sign. Like you could, this garage door was a Batman symbol. And you could, I used to love it because Batman's my favorite superhero. You could take a selfie like Batman. And then look, you know, this guy, I think he's just, you know, look all the way back there. I mean, this is all private property, right? Like, this must be maybe where he lived. He might have lived here or somewhere else. He lives, Isaiah Zagar still lives in this area. Look at that, all the way back there. All right, enough looking at the art. I mean, you could literally look at it forever. It goes down. Look at in there. That driveway's got some. Down here's got some. It's all over the city, all over South Philadelphia, you know, specifically. And you know, like, look, this building, the whole thing's covered. This random driveway. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Just mosaics everywhere you look. And, you know, did he ask for permission to do some of this? No, he didn't. You know, the story of Isaiah Zagar is very interesting. And again, I wanted to talk about graffiti and street art and the role of graffiti and street art in Philadelphia's life and, you know, the Philadelphia region. We got to be proud of our local art, and graffiti is very controversial. I mean, I've talked about this before, but I'm partial to graffiti. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with it because, I love it because it's technically, if you think about it, it's folk art. It's community art. It's from the streets. It's from the regular people who are usually not like formally trained in art. So they're not like schooled in all the different methods of painting, all the different, rules about perspective and all of that. They just, a lot of these graffiti artists and street artists figure it all out for themselves. And so there's something unique about that. At the same time, the places that street artists tend to make art are on private property, and otherwise, places that they're not technically allowed to by law. Look, here's another one just walking by. Very cool. Down some cobblestone alley, you have a beautiful mosaic. Cobblestone, mosaic. What do you think about that combination? It's pretty cool, right? And look, this whole back area of this building's covered. And there's more coming up. So, I went to this Italian water garden in the woods out near Swarthmore. And another one. And, the Italian water garden ruins is like one of those classic places where it's a historic place, but it's out of the way. No one goes there. So, of course, kids have found it, people who like graffiti, and they've covered it in graffiti. Or not covered it, but there is graffiti there. And for some people, the graffiti ruins the ambiance of the area. For me, it can enhance it if the graffiti is good. There's a lot of, I don't know. That's the thing about art. Quality is in the eye of the beholder, right? What is bad art? Is there such a thing as bad art? Some people would say yes. Other people would say no. It's an open question. But I think one thing people don't really realize is that street art in Philadelphia is one of the foundational cities for street art in the world, specifically graffiti. So now, okay, to talk about street art in Philly, we have to talk about graffiti. Now, a lot of people think that modern tagging culture, people have done graffiti forever. That's a human thing. Every city in the world, going back till time immemorial. I mean, you could trace it back to cave art. Cave art in prehistoric times technically was graffiti, right? If you think about it, kind of. There's definitely a relationship there. And so graffiti, but then you go to Pompeii and you also see graffiti in Pompeii, right? Like the famous Canum, what is it? What's the Latin for beware of dog? Shoot. There's a famous Latin word, Canum something. And it's in graffiti on Pompeii, right? It's a beware of dog thing. And so my point is, every civilization has had graffiti, but modern graffiti is different, because modern graffiti started with this notion of a tag, and how that started was, it comes from Philly. So in Philly in the 60s, I want to say, like early 60s, there was a guy in North Philly who's just a kid, and he started drawing on the walls of his school, and I think for some reason his nickname was Cornbread, and Cornbread started writing his name on all the walls. So he'd write cornbread, cornbread, cornbread everywhere, and then he did it in his school, and then he did it around the neighborhood, and suddenly people started talking about cornbread. Everybody was like, who's this cornbread guy? And of course, he became kind of famous locally in his neighborhood for drawing his name on all the walls. Cornbread, cornbread, cornbread everywhere, right? And he became a little bit of a folk hero for doing that. And other kids started noticing, and suddenly everyone was drawing their names on the walls. And it became a form of like marking your spot, or sort of like an I was here sort of thing for kids, for young people. And this evolved into like an art form, because every person's personal writing style became their thing, right? Like you can't draw, if you tried to write cornbread, you probably wouldn't get his handwriting exactly right. It would be slightly different. And same with every tag. So these are called tags. Before a hashtag, before a social media handle, you had a graffiti tag. And so people would do their specific design, and it was like their stamp, right? And if you wanted to, eventually, like very quickly, this process of writing your name all over the walls across the city became like a competition. So graffiti artists compete to go to every remote part of the city and tag every wall. So, the harder it is to get to a place, the more impressive it is if you can tag it, which is why you see graffiti like all over, in really crazy places, like abandoned buildings right at the top, on the roof. You'll see a graffiti artist has spray painted it. And that's them bragging, essentially. They're like, look at me, I got up here and I wrote my name here for everyone to see. Not only is it hard to get there, but if you wanted to take my name down, you'd have to get up there and take it down, right? So it's a challenge. And this became like a competition, and this whole culture of like tagging spread to New York City. And New York City famously in the 70s became like the epicenter of graffiti, like as a nuisance. And this spurred the whole like broken window theory and all sorts of stuff related to crime in the 80s and 90s. All these ideas that nowadays seem a little bit outdated. But it all sort of, New York took off. So a lot of New Yorkers think graffiti started there because they're New Yorkers, and New Yorkers tend to think the whole world revolves around them. That just comes with the territory of being a New Yorker. You're like, New York's the greatest place on earth. Everything started here, right? No, graffiti started in Philly. And put some respect on Cornbread's name. He's the original graffiti artist. And here's the thing, Cornbread, when he got older, he realized like, oh shoot, he kind of started something that is now covering, like everybody's spray painting on the walls of his city. And he kind of realized what he'd done. So I think he kind of understood that, you can't really, like, it's kind of a nuisance, right? And this gets into that debate about, is this unsanctioned art, or is it a nuisance and vandalism? Like, is this vandalism? Some say yeah, right? So Cornbread, in order to like maybe put a damper and kind of stop the spread of graffiti all over the city, he got together with artists and in the city and founded the Mural Arts Program. And the Mural Arts Program now has murals all over the city. And Philly has one of the greatest collections of murals in the world. It's often compared to Berlin, and I've been to Berlin. I think Berlin's got a bit more going on, not gonna lie. But I see why people want to make the comparison, because it is impressive. Like, all the stuff you can see here in Philly it's unique, and Philly is a center for community art. All right, so that's sort of an introduction to graffiti and street art in Philly, how it sort of started. I mean, that's a very basic introduction. There's so much more to say, but it sort of started in the 60s with Cornbread. It became this cultural phenomenon, and people started thinking it was a nuisance, and so Cornbread started the Mural Arts Program to kind of turn graffiti into more formalized community art, right? Let me just flip the camera around here. It almost seems like Picasso, like a Cubist reference there. There's a lot of cubism in these faces. One thing I like about Isaiah Zagar is he's a little naughty, right? So hopefully there's some, hopefully YouTube doesn't mind, and I reversed the image, so it's harder to see what that says and see what it's about, but maybe you get it. You know, the thing is with the story of Cornbread and the mural arts program, it's really gets to that question of what is vandalism, right? What is art? And art is transgressive, especially graffiti art, especially street art. So another thread getting to these beautiful mosaics is that in Philly, there's this man named Isaiah Zagar. And around the time that Cornbread was doing his thing up in North Philly, down here in South Philly, South Street was basically a derelict area. It was South Philly down to South Street is a historically black neighborhood, and it was very underserved, very run down. You know anything about America, race and class in America, black neighborhoods didn't get well treated, right? So the houses around South Street were falling apart, and there were plans to build a highway where South Street is now. So a lot of people thought that those buildings would just get torn down in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And so while they were waiting for the highway to get built, the landlords were like, okay, we can't get anybody to move in long term. We'll just rent all these spaces out to art students from Temple and from UArts and all the art universities that are now going under. They're no more. RIP to UArts and PAFA. But those students would rent here, and rent on South Street. And one of those students was Isaiah Zagar. And basically, Isaiah Zagar, he went to the Peace Corps in Peru, got super inspired by the art down there. And when he came back to Philly, he started making these crazy murals on South Street where he lived. And he was just like out of control, like in a certain sense. He was, he's a crazy artist, man, right? Artists are kind of wacky. And he just started doing this on every surface, right? Like, it didn't matter to him who owned it. I'm sure I think he like says he checked with people, but I get the sense he also just went for it. And he kind of just started covering every surface. And it was one of those situations where he he did it and then apologize later, right? Don't ask for permission, just apologize later. And he did it. And now like the city is, South Philly especially is just covered in so many of these murals. And people, it's very controversial, I think he became famous because I think there was like an estimate of something like 1 million square feet of wall surface in the city is covered by his murals. Something amazing like that. He's a very prolific artist. I still see him walking around South Street. He lives on South Street still. Unfortunately, the Eyes Gallery used to be right next to John's Roast Pork, and Jim's on South. It's a cheesesteak place, and Jim's had a fire maybe two or 3 years ago, and the Eyes Gallery, which was next door, burned down, or it got damaged. Not burned down, it got damaged. So Isaiah Zagar moved his Eyes Gallery down the street and sold that property to Jim's. So what's cool is actually if you go to Jim's now to get a cheesesteak. Why do I keep thinking it's John's? It's Jim's. Yeah. Jeez, I need more coffee. But yeah, if you go to Jim's, if you go upstairs in the back, you can see more of Isaiah's artwork, and it's the original stuff. And when I was a kid, I used to love that upstairs back room. It's really a magical place. So, but yeah, the point is he didn't ask for permission, and some people loved that, and other people hated it. And the now famous Magic Gardens that I started this video at, he didn't ask for permission to do that. He sort of asked if he could like clean up his neighbor's yard, and by clean up he meant cover it in art, and they didn't know that, and so they just said, yeah, sure, you can take care of it. They didn't live there, they lived somewhere else, like up in Boston or something. And so he started taking care of their yard, for his neighbor's yard, for them. And when they realized he had covered it in art, they were like, you got to pay rent, man. Like, what are you doing? This is not what we agreed to, right? But he's an artist. He doesn't pay rent. He doesn't do those kinds of things. So somehow, blah, 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 some newspaper article got published about it, and the community got together and helped figure out how to set up what the Magic Gardens is now. So it's like a museum with like, you know, a board and it's a tourist destination. So he was able to save it that way. But, you know, it's very transgressive, right? So I got to be careful because I don't want to film inside people's windows, but just check this out. What does OW mean? I wonder. Huh. It's funny. It's kind of cool. You know, in the history of street art, I think that S will live on forever. That is amazing. That S, if you grew up in the 90s or the 2000s and you remember gel pens on your binder in school, we used to draw that S on our binders at school all the time. Amazing. And now, here you go. It's graffiti. But that doesn't look like graffiti. This looks actually like someone's door. So, pretty cool. I like that. Well done. Well done. I love the way it just kind of goes up into the brick. There's no edge to it, you know? It just goes. So, you know, the thing is, these murals really cover every surface, a lot of places in South Philly, and it changes the real estate market around here. I think it increases the value of certain homes. Like some of these homes, he did a mosaic in the backyard when these houses would have been all like abandoned or nearly abandoned, and he just was having fun and he would go in and do stuff. And now I feel like for a lot of houses that increases the value because people like whimsical art in their backyard, especially if it's like from a local artist. So I think people really appreciate it sometimes. But other times, developers come in and they want to develop a lot or something, and it has a mural, and they don't like it. And especially, there are a lot of newcomers to this neighborhood who didn't grow up here, and they're not from Philly. Maybe they're from New York, or they just don't like. They don't like this style. It's not their style of art, right? And so there are a lot of people who really hate these murals and want to get rid of them. And every once in a while, there's some movement to like tear down one of these beautiful mosaics, something like that. And unfortunately, we've lost quite a few. There was a big one a couple blocks away from here, like I want to say 3 years ago, like sometime right after the pandemic. And it's gone because a developer bought the property and tore it down to build some gross looking cookie cutter building that has no architectural value, in my opinion, but it's cheap and we need more housing. So that's part of the thing, right? Like, what do you do when you need, in a city where you need to redevelop certain properties? We need more housing in Philly. you know, we need more housing in the US. So, you know, given that reality, what do you do with a building that's covered in art like this? It's not useful. It's beautiful, it's historic, but it's unclear if Isaiah got permission, and now we need to build stuff for people to live in, and this art is kind of in the way, right? So what do you do? Let me show you this. Art. It's beautiful. Seen backwards as if in a mirror. Wow, look at that huge chunk of glass. That's cool. That's a solid brick of glass. You can see right through it. That's really cool. I don't know. Can really look at this wall for hours. Can really look at it for hours. Puente Ponderosa. Yeah. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, a lot of people want to tear them down to build new stuff, and I get that, but you know, one of the other problems with public art like this, especially when it was built in the way it's built, with just no rules, no permission, no one to safeguard it, is that these murals take upkeep, right? Like with everything, historic or otherwise, funding is needed. And unfortunately, there's just not enough money to like restore or preserve all the mosaics. Again, Zagar, he did like millions of feet of this. Oh, come on, sparrows. I guess the birds have arrived. In my videos, there are always birds, and today we get sparrows, which are an invasive species, non-native, from Europe, and they've outcompeted all the songbirds around here, so. But anyway, yeah, getting back to the problem of preservation. So one of the things about this mural in particular, let's see. I mean, the murals are literally falling apart. So let's look at the ground real quick, because, you know, I like to do creek walks in my videos. This is sort of a city creek walk, if you think about it. That's cool. Someone put this on it. I like that. But yeah, let's look at the ground. Look here. It's a dead bird. That's definitely a dead bird. Some old mortar. And behind the dead bird, I'm not going to touch the bird. This old piece of tile, right? And this just fell right off the wall, probably from somewhere. You know, just old chunks of mortar. Look at that stone. Gotta be careful touching the ground here, because, you know, we're in Philly and there could be needles. So always want to be careful. But you can find some interesting stuff on the ground sometimes. So, you know, I found this red tile. It's just fallen off the wall. I'll put it back, but yeah, so that's kind of the video. It's not too much else. I mean, there's so much else to say and show you, but just wanted to cover that. So yeah, do we want to preserve this art? Do we want this art to be here in the first place? Community art in Philly, it's a big deal. Graffiti is a big problem, a big issue, right? And it's a big conversation. So anyway, my name's Sean. This is my channel, It's All Good. If you like this, like and subscribe and leave a comment. And yeah, thanks for watching. Signing off. Bye.